I bought the cheapest M1 Pro MacBook Pro that I could find in the entire country. These guys have honestly depreciated a lot more than I thought they were going to, which means that theoretically this could be a pretty good deal. And I gave myself a price target. I wanted to buy an M1 Pro MacBook Pro for less than $1,000, which is the price of the cheapest new MacBook you can buy. And I did that, barely. I paid $950 for what should be a fully functional M1 Pro MacBook Pro, and here's the kicker. It's a 16-inch. Oh, okay, we've got an actual MagSafe power adapter. That's a good sign. I'm actually quite excited about this, but I am a little nervous as well because according to the listing that I purchased, while this thing should work fine, it might have one or two issues, but we'll find out right after a word from today's video sponsor. Today's video is sponsored by the new Anker Prime 14-in-1 charging docking station and Anker Prime charger. 14 versatile interfaces in a compact body, including 160-watt ultra-fast 4-port charging and 10 ports for seamless data transfer thanks to 3 charge ports and 3 10GB per second data ports on the front. It also solves a common issue with other USB hubs thanks to its built-in power supply, meaning you don't need an ugly external brick taking up yet more space on your desk. With dual 4K display support, Ethernet, and 3 USB 2 peripheral ports around back, you can keep your setup well connected and out of sight. Similarly, Anker's Prime Charger provides you the ultimate compact power delivery for at home or on the go. With a total output of 100 watts, you can fast charge a 14-inch MacBook Pro or break it out to 3 devices. And it does all of that at half the size of other 100-watt chargers. And pair both of these options with the Anker Prime USB-C cable sporting a durable design that can endure over 300,000 bends as well as deliver up to 240 watts over a single cable. So if you want to learn more about Anker's incredible new devices, check out the links in the description down below. A big thanks to Anker for sponsoring, and now let's get back to it. Okay, let's get into this and see what this MacBook Pro looks like. Now, as far as I'm aware, this should be a base model, so it should just have 16 gigs of RAM, half a terabyte of storage, and the regular M1 Pro. But because this is the 16-inch, remember, there's no binned version of the M1 Pro available. So this is actually more powerful than I thought I was originally gonna get. Oh my gosh, how many layers are in this thing? I finally see it. Oh, it's in a case. Interesting. That was a lot. So here is our 16-inch MacBook Pro in all of its glory. I have to say, I actually don't mind this case design. Oh, we've got a bit of a denty in the lid here. They probably should have put this case on sooner. Look at this guy. Looks like it's in pretty good condition here otherwise. Let's take the bottom off and see what that looks like. Well, it's definitely a little dusty, but I don't really see any damage. That is not bad. I was really expecting that we would see some scuffs around the edges, but I don't see.
Contains a built-in screen reader.
The lid is closed. Why does it always?
Press Command F5 now to turn it on and set.
It always interrupts me. But anyway, this is in much better condition than I thought. The only thing I'm really noticing is a little bit of scratching around the USB-C ports on the left side. All it really needs is a bit of a cleanup, and then I guess we do have that dent on the lid. And that kind of brings me to the actual problem with this machine and the reason it was under $1,000. And that is, I mean, it's kind of hard to tell, but there is a slight dark spot on the screen. And yeah, it's right where that dent is. So whatever impacted the top of this computer, it is noticeable on the display. So you gotta watch out for that. I mean, these display panels are so thin that there's just no room for error in there. On these setup windows, you can definitely see it more clearly, but I don't think it's actually that bad. I kind of was expecting worse. So now that we've got it set up, let's run through the normal checks that I like to do when I buy a used Mac. First, let's check the spec that we have. We do have an M1 Pro, 16 gigabytes of RAM and 500 gigabytes of storage. Let's go over to the system report. And because we're on the 16-inch here, we've got the full 16-core GPU. That's unironically really nice. At this price point, I was expecting to be a double bin 14-inch. And wow, only 56 cycles on the battery. That is really surprising. I thought that this was gonna be a lot more heavily used. And now that we've checked out the specs, let's go ahead and check out the inside, because that's another good indication of how much a machine has been used, if it's all full of dust or crap or any signs of water ingress. We want to know about that now. Well, I'm still covered by the eBay money back guarantee. Now, if you're unfamiliar with how to get into these machines, you gotta first get a suction cup on the bottom here, and then pry in our pick here. We can then go along the sides. We should hear, that's one. And 2 clips disengaged. Okay, now we can pull up. There's some more in the center. Those are now gone. Can turn it sideways and boom. That was actually really clean. I'm normally not that fast. So there we've got our 4 128 gigabyte NAND modules making up a total of 512. Bunch of empty pads over on the other side there. And I know what you might be thinking, because I've thought it too. Why not just solder new storage onto those pads? Well, you can't, because it's not just the storage that's missing. Look at all of these other empty spots here. There should be components on that for the NAND that's not installed. And even if you do install NAND and all of those components, you have to program all of the NAND together, so you would still have to take off the original storage, program it, and then put all 8 chips back on. Apple, why do you do this to us? Why can't you just be normal? But anyway, the things that you want to look out for when you inspect a used MacBook like this: dust in the fans, we don't have any. Any signs of water intrusion or corrosion around, especially the edges of the board, again, we don't have that either. And then of course the battery, this looks to be an original Apple battery. I don't think that this has been replaced. This overall looks really solid. I think seriously the only reason that I got this for so cheap was because of that dark spot on the screen. And it makes sense, because if we go on Apple's self-service repair store for our 16-inch 2021 MacBook Pro, the price after returning the currently installed display is $667. Now, if you want to save a little bit of money, you can buy one on eBay, but even then, I'm seeing about $450 is the base price for a used display. And because of Apple's infuriating parts pairing process, installing a used display will lose out on features like True Tone. And this is the frustrating reality of trying to find a used MacBook these days. Now that the parts have become so expensive, it's kind of hard to find a scenario where you could repair this economically. Like I mentioned earlier, I paid $950 for this thing, but if I spent $450 on a display, which still wouldn't return this thing to full OEM spec because I'd lose True Tone, I'd be in this thing for about $1,400. But having an M1 Pro MacBook Pro back in the studio at this price point is a really interesting discussion, because setting aside the issues with repairability, this is a really good value for performance. I ran a bunch of tests comparing this MacBook Pro to the M2 MacBook Air, which costs the same amount of money, and the M3 Pro MacBook Pro, which is its direct successor. Starting with Cinebench 2024 in the multi-core test, the M1 Pro falls pretty much right in the middle of the M2 and the M3 Pro, providing a nice middle ground of performance. And in Blender Classroom CPU, we see much the same. It falls right in the middle. But switching over to the GPU test in Blender, we see a pretty significant gain open up for the M3 Pro. That newer graphics architecture really shines here. It absolutely trounced the M1 Pro and the M2 MacBook Air. A very impressive showing there. But in GFX Bench, where it can't take advantage of the ray tracing as effectively, once again the M1 Pro falls in the middle with pretty significant performance gains over the M2 for the same price. So far, everything here makes a lot of sense, and the M1 Pro sits very nicely between the M2 and the M3 Pro. However, something weird happens when you go into Final Cut. I put together a quick 5-minute 4K ProRes timeline in Final Cut and let them render out that scene, and I was shocked to find that the M1 Pro and the M3 Pro finished at exactly the same time. It took 55 seconds for both of these machines to run through this render, where the M2 chip took 2 minutes and 1 second. And this was a pretty surprising result. You would think that between 2 generations of chip, you'd notice some gains in performance for this test, but no. The M1 Pro and the M3 Pro, I think likely because they have the same hardware encoders that haven't really been changed all that much, are both really, really good in Final Cut. And that continues with the export. It took 27 seconds for the M3 Pro, followed very closely by the M1 Pro at 35 seconds. and the M2 at 2 minutes 16. So when you put all of this together, I think you get a very, very compelling picture. This 16-inch MacBook Pro, which costs the same as an M2 MacBook Air, is absolutely stomping all over it in terms of performance. I mean, it's not exactly surprising. It's a much beefier laptop with a larger design, much more powerful chip, and beefier cooling. But again, they're the same price. That's pretty incredible, but still somehow not as incredible as the comparison between the M1 Pro and the M3 Pro. Obviously, yes, there are chip improvements going from M1 Pro to M3 Pro, but given the price differential and the size of those differences in performance, this is a phenomenal value. I mean, we're comparing a $950 laptop to a $2,500 laptop, and it's only 7 seconds slower in a Final Cut export. So for 950 bucks, we're getting a 16-inch ProMotion mini LED display. We're getting 16 gigs of RAM, half a terabyte of storage, plenty of performance, loads of ports, and a big old stinking battery. This is a phenomenal value. And look, I understand that you might not want to buy a defective MacBook. That definitely gave me pause when I was spending the money on this thing. So if you're willing to spend a bit more, you can find these things for 11, 12, 1300 bucks. Now, does that mean that my deal was good or bad? Honestly, I'm not really sure because, like I mentioned, the issue is fairly minor, but if I were to repair it, it would cost me more than what I could just go out and buy a fully functioning one for. But is this even really a repair? Like, nothing's broken, it's just a little bit damaged. I don't really know. Let me know in the comments below if you think I got a good deal or a bad one. Would you pay 950 bucks for this MacBook Pro? I'll tell you what though, I am very excited to have this in the arsenal for when the M4 Pro comes out. We're still waiting on some new M4 Max, and I'm very curious to see how this is going to stack up against much more expensive offerings. So if that's something that you'd like to see, make sure to get subscribed and turn on notifications because I'm going to be covering it all. As usual, thank you guys so much for watching. Like, comment, subscribe. I'll see you in the next one.